Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Call. Jarrett Bolton had written 17 psychological thrillers in his career. He knew every twist, every manipulation, every way a seemingly perfect life could shatter in an instant. Yet nothing he'd crafted on paper had prepared him for this moment. The Colorado highway stretched ahead, mountain peaks turning purple in the dying light. Leslie sat beside him in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone with that familiar crease between her eyebrows that appeared whenever she dealt with work emails. 10 years of marriage had taught him to read that expression. Her marketing firm had landed a major client, and she was already strategizing. "You're doing it again," Jarrett said, keeping his tone light. "Doing what?" She didn't look up. "Working on vacation." We agreed. His phone erupted with a shrill ring, the emergency tone he'd set for unknown numbers. Jarrett frowned, putting it on speaker while keeping his eyes on the road. "Mr. Bolton?" A grave male voice. "Official. This is Officer Wade Lang with the Colorado State Police." "Yes, officer. Is there a problem?" "Sir, I need to verify some information. Is your wife's name Leslie Curtis Bolton?" Jarrett's stomach tightened. Beside him, Leslie finally looked up from her phone. "Yes, that's correct. Why do you ask that?" A pause. Heavy. Weighted with something terrible. "Sir, there's no easy way to say this. United Flight 447 from Dallas to Denver crashed approximately 90 minutes ago in the San Juan Mountains. There were no survivors. Your wife's body was identified through dental records 45 minutes ago." The world tilted. Jarrett's hands tightened on the wheel, his mind racing through possibilities, explanations, anything that made sense. Beside him, Leslie had gone still, her face pale. "Officer," Jarrett said, his voice remarkably steady despite the ice flooding his veins. "That's impossible." "Sir, I understand this is shocking." "No, you don't understand. My wife is sitting right next to me. We've been driving together for the past 3 hours. Silence. Then, "Mr. Bolton, what did you just say?" "My wife is in the car with me. Right now. We're on Highway 285, about 30 miles outside of Denver." The officer's voice changed, losing its sympathy and gaining an edge of alarm. "Sir, stop the car immediately. Right now. Pull over." "What? What?" "Sir, stop the car. If there's someone in that vehicle claiming to be your wife, whoever that person is, that's not your wife. Leslie Bolton died in that crash. Her body is in the morgue." Jarrett's blood turned to ice water. His eyes slid sideways. The woman beside him was already looking at him, and she was smiling. Not Leslie's smile. Not the warm, slightly crooked grin he'd fallen in love with. This was something else entirely. Something cold and calculated and utterly alien. "Jarrett," she said softly, reaching toward the phone. "Hang up." He jerked the wheel right, tires screeching as he pulled onto the shoulder. His mind was already working, cataloging details he should have noticed. The subtle differences in mannerisms. The way she'd held her fork at the restaurant. The unfamiliar perfume he'd chalked up to try something new. How long had Leslie been gone? Since Dallas? Before? "Mr. Bolton?" "Mr. Bolton." The officer's voice crackled through the speaker. The woman, not Leslie, his mind screamed, reached out and disconnected the call with a single smooth motion. "I'm impressed," she said, her voice dropping the slight Texas lilt Leslie had never quite lost. Most people take longer to figure it out. Jarrett didn't move, didn't breathe. He'd written scenes like this 100 times. The key was staying calm, gathering information, looking for the angle. In his novels, the protagonist always had a plan. But this wasn't a novel. This was real. And Leslie, his Leslie, was dead. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Does it matter? What matters is what happens next, Jarrett. And trust me, you're going to want to cooperate. Because if you don't..." She pulled something from her purse. His heart stopped. A gun. Small, silver, deadly. "You'll join the real Leslie much sooner than planned." Jarrett's mind raced. The highway was empty in both directions. His phone was between them, but she was watching him like a hawk. In the rearview mirror, the mountains loomed, indifferent to the nightmare unfolding in this car. He'd spent his entire career writing about ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances, about protagonists who refused to break, who found reserves of strength they never knew existed. Now was his turn. "What do you want?" he asked. Her smile widened. "Keep driving. We're going home, and you're going to pretend everything is perfect. Because, Jarrett, the show is just beginning." He put the car in gear, his hands steady on the wheel. But behind his calm exterior, a different Jarrett was awakening. Not the best-selling author, not the loving husband, the Jarrett Bolton from before the success, before the safety, the kid who'd survived foster homes and street fights, who'd clawed his way up from nothing. That Jarrett had been sleeping for a decade. Not anymore. As he pulled back onto the highway, Jarrett began a plan. Chapter 2, The Ghost. Jarrett drove on autopilot, his mind splitting into parallel tracks. Track 1, immediate survival. Track 2, gathering intelligence. Track 3, planning 3 moves ahead, the way he'd learned when survival wasn't a metaphor. The woman kept the gun low but visible, resting against her thigh. Professional. Trained. This wasn't some crime of passion or improvised scheme. "What should I call you?" Jarrett asked, keeping his voice conversational. "Since you're not Leslie." She studied him with predatory interest. "Angelica will do. Angelica Alvarado. Not that you'll need the name for long. You're going to kill me. Eventually." She said it like commenting on the weather. "But not yet. First, you need to serve your purpose." Jarrett filed that away. Purpose meant a plan. A plan meant other players. Whose idea was this? Does it matter? It does if I'm going to die anyway. Call it a writer's curiosity. Angelica laughed, genuinely amused. "I was told you'd be smart. That's why the plan had to be perfect." She gestured with the gun. "Turn right at the next exit. We're taking the back way." As Jarrett followed her directions through increasingly isolated roads, he let his mind drift back. Not to Leslie. That pain was too raw, too devastating to touch yet. Instead, to his own history, the foundation he'd built his life upon. Jarrett Bolton, born Jarrett Cole. Mother died when he was 6. Father never in the picture. Foster care from 6 to 16. Fought his way through it all. Learned to read people. Learned when to fight and when to disappear. Got his GED. Then worked 3 jobs to put himself through community college. Found he had a gift for words, for understanding the dark corners of human nature. His first novel, The Nowhere Man, had been semi-autobiographical. A protagonist who existed in society's cracks. Invisible until he chose not to be. It had struck a nerve, launched his career. 14 more books followed, each dissecting the psychology of predator and prey. And through it all, Leslie had been there. They'd met at a book signing 8 years ago. She'd walked up with a worn copy of his 3rd novel, told him she'd read it 5 times, trying to understand her abusive ex Jarrett had offered to buy her coffee. 3 months later, they were engaged. She'd been his light, his proof that life could be more than survival. And now she was gone. Left here, Angelica commanded. They turned onto a gravel road, trees closing in overhead. Jarrett's house was another 5 miles through these woods. He'd chosen the location for privacy. Now, that isolation was a liability. "You're doing better than expected," Angelica observed. "Most people would be crying, panicking. You're too calm. Would you prefer hysterics?" "I prefer honesty." "You're planning something." Jarrett allowed himself a small smile. "Of course I am. Question is whether you care. Smart man knows when he's beaten. Smart man knows there's always an angle." He pulled into his driveway, the house dark ahead. "Let me guess, you've been here before. You know the layout. Probably planted evidence, maybe surveillance equipment." Angelica's silence was answer enough. Jarrett cut the engine, sitting in the sudden quiet. "Whose revenge am I part of? Because this is revenge, not money. Too elaborate, too personal. Someone I wronged? Exposed in a book? You'll find out soon enough." Out of the car, slowly, as Jarrett stepped into the cool evening air, his phone buzzed. Angelica snatched it from his hand, glancing at the screen. Her expression darkened. Officer Lang again. Persistent. She powered it off, pocketed it. Inside. Now, the house felt wrong. Jarrett noticed it immediately. Small things out of place. A book turned the wrong way. His office chair adjusted to a different height. Angelica, or someone else, had been here, living his life, preparing for this moment. How long? He asked as she directed him to the living room. How long has the real Leslie been gone? 3 days. The switch happened in Dallas at her hotel. Quick injection, out the service entrance, onto the plane with her ID and ticket. I took her place at the conference, answered her calls, played the devoted wife. Angelica settled into Leslie's favorite chair. No, not Leslie's anymore. You almost noticed at dinner tonight. I saw it in your eyes. She was right. There had been a moment when Leslie, Angelica, had ordered wine instead of whiskey. A tiny deviation, but it had nagged at him. So, the plan is what? I'm found dead in my house, grieving widower's suicide after losing his wife in a crash. Close. Murder-suicide, actually. Turns out you killed her before she left, put her on that plane to cover it up. But guilt overwhelmed you. They'll find evidence, her blood in your office, your searches for how to cause plane crashes, financial motive, insurance payout. Angelica's smile was razor-sharp. Your readers will eat it up. The thriller writer who became his own villain. It was elegant, Jared admitted grudgingly. Frame him posthumously. Destroy his legacy along with his life. This wasn't just about killing him, it was about annihilation, which meant whoever orchestrated this hated him personally. Vincent Brennan, Jarrett said quietly. Angelica's expression flickered, surprise, annoyance. He said you were smart. Vincent, of course. The failed writer who'd accused Jarrett of stealing his manuscript 7 years ago. Jarrett had never even seen a manuscript, but Vincent's lawyer had made noise, filed suit. It was dismissed within weeks. No evidence, no basis. But Vincent had never let it go. At every book tour, every interview, Vincent would appear, posting online rants, sending threatening letters. Jarrett had gotten restraining orders, but Vincent always found ways around them. And now Vincent had found the ultimate revenge. Where is he? Jarrett asked. Somewhere you'll never reach. Angelica stood, raising the gun. Enough conversation. Time to... A sound from outside. Gravel crunching. Car doors. Angelica's head whipped toward the window. What did you... Officer Lang must have traced my phone, Jarrett said calmly, though his heart hammered. Or maybe the cell tower ping. They know I was heading here. Red and blue lights flickered through the curtains. For one precious second, Angelica was distracted, weighing options. Jarrett moved. He was across the room before she could react, knocking the gun from her hand. It skittered across the hardwood. They crashed into the bookshelf together, novels tumbling down around them. Jarrett pinned her wrist, but she was strong, trained, dangerous. Police! Mr. Bolton! Angelica's knee caught his ribs. Pain exploded through his chest. She twisted free, lunging for the gun. The door burst open. Officers poured in, weapons drawn. Freeze! Angelica froze, hand inches from the pistol. Jarrett rolled away, gasping. Officer Lang stepped forward, older than Jarrett expected, with steel-gray hair and hard eyes. Mr. Bolton, step away from her. As Jarrett stumbled back, as Angelica was forced to the ground and cuffed, as the machinery of law enforcement kicked into gear, one thought crystallized in his mind. This wasn't over. Angelica was just the weapon. Vincent Brennan was the hand that wielded it, and Jarrett was going to make him pay, not with lawyers or restraining orders this time. Vincent had killed Leslie, destroyed her, framed her death as part of a sick game. The old Jarrett Bolton, the survivor, the fighter, he had work to do. Chapter 3, The Investigation. The interrogation room at Denver Police Headquarters smelled like bad coffee and desperation. Jarrett sat across from Officer Lang and his partner, a sharp-eyed detective named Tanya Livingston, who specialized in homicides that didn't fit normal patterns. Walk me through it again, Livingston said, her voice deceptively gentle. Everything from the phone call to when we arrived. Jarrett had been through it 4 times already. Each retelling was consistent, controlled. He knew they were looking for cracks, contradictions. Standard procedure when the husband survives and the wife doesn't. The real question, Jarrett said, meeting her gaze directly, is whether you verified my wife's death, found evidence at my house, and connected Angelica Alvarado to Vincent Brennan. Lang shifted. We're asking the questions, Mr. Bolton, and I've answered them multiple times. While Vincent Brennan is out there, free, celebrating the fact that he murdered my wife. We have Alvarado in custody, Livingston said. She's not talking, lawyered up immediately. But we did find something interesting. She slid a photograph across the table. Recognize this? It was a still from surveillance footage, slightly grainy. Vincent Brennan, looking thinner than Jarrett remembered, standing outside a small theater in what appeared to be downtown Denver. The timestamp was dated 6 months ago. That's the Starlight Theater, Jarrett said. Community playhouse, where Angelica Alvarado was performing in a production of Othello. Livingston continued. She played Desdemona. Vincent attended every show. They met afterward. Coffee turned into dinners, dinners into late nights at his apartment. Jarrett's hands clenched. Vincent had recruited her, groomed her for this. How long had he been planning? What else? Jarrett demanded. Lang and Livingston exchanged glances. Finally, Lang spoke. Your wife's body. The identification was preliminary, based on the passenger manifest and some jewelry. But dental records matched. It's definitely her. The words hit like bullets. Part of Jarrett had held on a hope, some irrational belief that maybe it was all an elaborate hoax. But no, Leslie was gone. I need to see him, Jarrett said quietly. I need to see Brennan. That's not possible, Livingston said. You're technically still a person of interest. I'm the victim here. Jarrett's control slipped, voice rising. My wife was murdered. I was nearly killed. You have the person who held me at gunpoint. You have motive connecting her to Brennan. What more do you need? Evidence, Lang said flatly. Solid, prosecutable evidence. Right now, we have Alvarado on assault charges. But she's claiming she was hired as an actress for what she thought was an elaborate prank, got scared when you discovered the truth, and panicked. Her lawyer will argue diminished capacity, manipulation by Brennan. Without proof, he orchestrated the plane crash. There was a plane crash. Leslie died. The crash was mechanical failure, Livingston said gently. Hydraulic system malfunction. NTSB is investigating, but preliminary reports show no signs of sabotage. It could have been tragic coincidence that Brennan exploited. Jarrett stared at them, understanding dawning. You can't prove he caused it, so you can't prove murder conspiracy. Not yet, Lang admitted, but we're building a case. Financial records, communications between Brennan and Alvarado, your history with him. It takes time. Time Vincent would use to disappear, cover his tracks, or worse, complete his plan. Jarrett stood abruptly. Am I free to go? For now. Don't leave town. And Mr. Bolton? Livingston's voice stopped him at the door. I know what you're thinking. Don't. Let us handle this. Jarrett didn't respond. He simply walked out. The November air was cold as Jarrett emerged from the police station. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose that Leslie would have loved. She'd always been an early riser, dragging him out of bed to watch sunrises from their deck. Never again. His phone, returned by the police, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know you want to talk. Meet me. Details to follow. Vincent, taunting him, daring him. Jarrett's jaw tightened. The police wanted evidence. Fine, he'd get them evidence. But not through legal channels, not through waiting for bureaucracy to turn its wheels. He pulled out his laptop from the car and drove to a nearby diner, ordering coffee he wouldn't drink. For the next 3 hours, Jarrett Bolton disappeared into research mode. Vincent Brennan, age 41, born in Michigan, moved to Colorado for college, stayed after graduating with an MFA in creative writing, published 2 novels that sold poorly, optioned for film rights that never materialized. Blamed Jarrett for stealing The Vanishing Point, a manuscript Vincent claimed to have sent to the same agent. Jarrett had pulled the files years ago during the lawsuit. Vincent's manuscript and Jarrett's published novel shared exactly 0 plot points, themes, or character elements. The only similarity was the thriller genre. The judge had called Vincent's claim frivolous and potentially defamatory. But Vincent had never let it go. His social media was a shrine to obsession, Jarrett's name mentioned thousands of times, conspiracies about the publishing industry, rants about stolen success. And then, 6 months ago, the post stopped. No more public ranting. No more appearances at book signings. Vincent Brennan had gone quiet because he'd been planning this. Jarrett pulled up property records. Vincent rented a small house in Aurora, worked part-time at a bookstore. Bank records would require a warrant, but Jarrett could access public information. Vincent had no significant assets, no history of mechanical expertise or aviation knowledge. So how had he caused the crash? Or had it really been coincidence, as the police suggested? Jarrett didn't believe in coincidence. Not at this level. His phone buzzed again, Riverside Park. 2 p.m. Come alone. I'll know if you don't. A public place, plenty of witnesses. Vincent was careful, but he also wanted to gloat, to see Jarrett's pain up close. That arrogance was a weakness. Jarrett opened a new document on his laptop. Not a novel this time, but something more important, a plan. In his books, the protagonist always found leverage. Some secret the antagonist couldn't afford exposed. Some pressure point that turned the tables. Jarrett needed to find Vincent's. He started with Angelica, actress, talented enough for community theater. How had Vincent convinced her to commit murder? Money? Manipulation? Love? Jarrett pulled up the Starlight Theater website, found archived cast photos from Othello. There was Angelica, beautiful and poised, and beside her, another actor who looked familiar. Jarrett enlarged the image. His blood went cold. It was Vincent, not in the audience, in the play, listed as playing Iago, the manipulator, the villain who destroyed lives through lies and schemes. Of course, Vincent hadn't just met Angelica at the theater. They performed together. He'd literally played a role about manipulation and revenge, but there was more. Jarrett scrolled through other cast photos, other productions. The theater had put on 6 shows in the past year. Vincent appeared in 4 of them, always supporting roles, always the villain or the schemer. And in 3 of those productions, the director was listed as Dan Lopez. Jarrett pulled up Lopez's information. Former Hollywood stuntman, moved to Denver 5 years ago after a career-ending injury. Specialized in staging realistic fight choreography and practical effects, including, according to his resume, aviation and mechanical consultation for film productions. There it was, the connection. Vincent hadn't sabotaged the plane himself. He'd had help from someone who knew how. Someone who understood hydraulics and systems and how to make a crash look accidental. Jarrett's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling together pieces. Lopez had worked on a film about an airline disaster. He consulted with actual mechanics. He'd know exactly what to do. But why would Lopez help Vincent? Money seemed unlikely. The bookstore job didn't pay enough for a professional hit, which meant Vincent had something else to offer. Jarrett dug deeper into Lopez's background. The injury that ended his Hollywood career, a stunt gone wrong on a set. Lopez had sued the production company and lost. But the director who'd pushed for the dangerous stunt, who'd overruled safety concerns. Jarrett found an old Variety article. His stomach dropped. The director was Saul Stewart, who had optioned one of Jarrett's novels 3 years ago for a film that never got made. Stewart's production company had collapsed after fraud allegations. Stewart blamed Jarrett publicly, claiming the novel's film rights were cursed, that Jarrett had interfered with production. It was nonsense. Jarrett had stayed completely out of the process. But Stewart needed a scapegoat. And Vincent had found that scapegoat a willing ally in Dan Lopez, who already hated Stewart and, by extension, anyone connected to him. The conspiracy was bigger than Jarrett had realized. Vincent had assembled a team, each with their own grudge against Jarrett or his associates. Angelica, Lopez, possibly others, all working together to destroy him. But conspiracies had a weakness. They required trust, and trust could be broken. Jarrett began to smile. It was not a nice expression. He knew exactly how to break them. Chapter 4. The Meeting. Riverside Park stretched along the Platte River, popular with joggers and families despite the November chill. Jarrett arrived 30 minutes early, scanning for surveillance, backup, anything that suggested Vincent wasn't alone. The park was clean. Too clean. which meant Vincent had planned carefully. At precisely 2 p.m., Vincent Brennan appeared, walking down the main path with hands in his pockets. He looked terrible, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes, hair unwashed. But his smile was triumphant. "Jarrett Bolton," Vincent said, sitting on the bench beside him without invitation. "The great novelist. How does it feel to live in one of your own thrillers?" "Where's Lopez?" Jarrett asked quietly. Vincent's smile faltered. "I don't know what." "Dan Lopez. Your director friend from the theater. The one who helped you sabotage Flight 447. Jarrett kept his voice level, conversational. Around them, life continued. Children playing, couples walking dogs. The former stuntman who knows mechanics and hydraulics. "You've been busy," Vincent said after a moment. "But you can't prove anything." "I don't need to. The police will figure out eventually. Right now, they're pulling Lopez's phone records, his financial transactions, his travel history. If he went anywhere near Dallas in the last week, they'll know." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Even if that's true, so what? Angelica won't talk. Lopez won't talk. You have nothing." "I have you," Jarrett said. "Meeting me in public. Being seen together. The police know about your obsession, your history with me. This conversation is painting a target on your back. Or on yours." Vincent leaned back. "You're the grieving widower, remember? Unstable, desperate. If something happens to me, you're the obvious suspect. I've been very careful to document my fear of you. Letters to my lawyer. Emails to friends. A video confession, just in case." It was a good countermove. Jarrett had expected it. "You made a mistake," Jarrett said. "You wanted me to suffer, to be destroyed publicly. But you gave me something you didn't intend." "What's that?" "Time." Jarrett stood. "Time to investigate. Time to think. Time to plan. You see, Vincent, I write thrillers for a living. I understand how plots work, how to build suspense, how to turn the tables in the third act. And I know the one thing you've forgotten." Vincent stood as well, anger flashing across his face. "What?" "The villain always loses." Jarrett walked away, leaving Vincent fuming on the bench. He could feel eyes watching him. Not police, someone else. Vincent's backup, probably Lopez. Let them watch. Phase 1 was complete. Engage the enemy, provoke a response, force mistakes. Now for Phase 2. Jarrett's house was still a crime scene. Yellow tape across the door. He wasn't allowed inside yet, which was fine. He'd rented a hotel room and set up a temporary base of operations. His phone rang. "Officer Lang. Mr. Bolton, we need you to come in again. There's been a development." "What kind of development?" "Dan Lopez was found dead an hour ago. Apparent suicide. Left a note confessing to sabotaging Flight 447, claiming he acted alone." Jarrett's blood went cold. Vincent was tying off loose ends. "That's convenient," Jarrett said. "Too convenient," Lang agreed. "But without Lopez alive, we have no way to verify the confession or connect him to Brennan. Angelica is still refusing to cooperate, and her lawyer is making noise about releasing her on bail. You can't let that happen. We're trying. But unless we get something concrete in the next 48 hours, the DA might not have enough to hold her." Jarrett ended the call, his mind racing. Vincent was accelerating his plan, eliminating witnesses. Lopez's suicide provided a convenient scapegoat and removed someone who could implicate Vincent, which meant Angelica was next. Jarrett had 48 hours to break the conspiracy before Vincent cleaned house completely. He pulled up his laptop and began typing, not a novel, but something that looked like one. A manuscript. The working title, The Collaborators. Chapter 1 began. They thought they'd planned the perfect crime. They were wrong. Jarrett wrote furiously, pouring in every detail he'd uncovered. Vincent's obsession, Angelica's recruitment, Lopez's involvement. But he wrote it as fiction, changing names, adding embellishments. To anyone reading, it would look like his next thriller. But to Vincent, Angelica, and anyone else involved, it would be something else. Proof that Jarrett knew everything. At midnight, Jarrett emailed the manuscript to 6 addresses: his agent, his publisher, 3 writer friends, and 1 dead-drop email address he'd created specifically for this purpose. Then he sent a text to Vincent. "Check your email. You're going to love my new book." He waited. 10 minutes. 20. His phone rang. Vincent, voice shaking with rage. What the hell is this? My next bestseller, Jarrett said calmly. Or maybe my last. Depends on how this all plays out. You can't publish this. It's defamation. It's fiction, Jarrett interrupted. Says so right on the title page. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. You know, the standard disclaimer. I'll sue you into oblivion. Then you'll have to prove it's about you, which means admitting to everything in court under oath. Please, Vincent, I'd love to see you try. Silence. Heavy breathing. What do you want? Vincent finally asked. I want my wife back. But since you murdered her, I'll settle for justice. You'll never prove anything. I don't have to. That manuscript is already out there in 6 different hands. If something happens to me, it gets published posthumously. Your name, your crimes, all of it becomes public record. Even if you're never convicted, everyone will know. Every book club, every reader, every publisher. You'll be famous, Vincent, just not the way you wanted. You're bluffing. Am I? Tell me, how did Lopez really die? Because I'm betting it wasn't suicide. I'm betting you arranged it, just like you arranged Leslie's death. How many people have to die before you're satisfied? Stop. And Angelica? Is she next? Or maybe you're already planning how to eliminate her. She's a liability now, in custody, facing charges. How long before she realizes you're not coming to save her? Before she decides cooperation is better than loyalty? She won't talk. Everyone talks eventually, Vincent. It's human nature. Survival instinct. You should know that. You're a writer. Or you were, before your bitterness destroyed any talent you had. The line went dead. Jarrett smiled grimly. Now came the hardest part, waiting for Vincent to make his next move. Chapter 5, The Confession. Angelica Alvarado sat in the county jail, her 3rd day in custody. Bail hearing was tomorrow. Her lawyer was confident. Assault charges, first offense, community ties. She'd be out by noon. Then Vincent would kill her. She knew that now. The realization had come slowly, pieces fitting together in the long hours of isolation. Lopez dead, Jarrett alive and fighting back. Vincent's promises suddenly seeming hollow. She'd been a fool, an actress playing the role of her life, too caught up in the drama to see she was just another prop in Vincent's revenge play. When the guard appeared at her cell, Angelica expected her lawyer. Instead, she was taken to an interrogation room where Detective Livingston waited with Officer Lang and someone new, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an FBI badge. Ms. Alvarado, the FBI agent said, "My name is Special Agent Grace Warren. I work in domestic terrorism and conspiracy cases. I need to talk to you about Vincent Brennan. I want my lawyer. You can have your lawyer. But first, listen to what I have to say." Warren slid a photograph across the table. Dan Lopez, pale and lifeless on a bathroom floor. This was ruled suicide, but we both know Vincent Brennan killed him. Angelica stared at the photo, ball rising in her throat. "You're next," Warren continued. "Maybe not immediately. Maybe Vincent waits until after your bail hearing, until you're out. Maybe he stages an accident, another suicide. But you're a loose end, Ms. Alvarado. And Vincent doesn't leave loose ends." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Warren leaned forward. "You're an actress, a talented one. Vincent recruited you for the performance of your life. Impersonate Leslie Bolton, get close to Jarrett, help frame him for murder. But it's over now. The play is finished, and the director is killing off the cast. That's not. There's more." Warren produced another photograph. This one showed a young woman, blonde, early 20s. Tamara Bond, actress from Chicago, worked with Vincent Brennan 4 years ago on an independent film. She disappeared shortly after the production wrapped. Her body was found 6 months later in a forest preserve. Cause of death was drowning, ruled accidental. Angelica's hands started shaking. "Vincent has a pattern," Warren said. "He uses people, particularly women, to carry out his schemes. And when they're no longer useful, they vanish." Tamara wasn't the first. There was Jody Mills, a journalist who was investigating Vincent's plagiarism claims. She died in a hit and run. Bobby Chon, a lawyer who represented the publishing house that rejected Vincent's novels. House fire. That's not possible. We've been building a case against Vincent Brennan for 3 years, Warren said. But he's careful, smart. We couldn't connect him definitively to any of these deaths. Until now. Until he got sloppy with Leslie Bolton. Livingston spoke up. You can walk out of here tomorrow on bail. Go home. Wait for whatever Vincent has planned. Where you can help us. Tell us everything. How he recruited you, what he promised, how he planned Leslie's murder. With your testimony, we can put Vincent away for life. And what happens to me? Angelica whispered. Prison time, probably, Warren admitted. But witness protection, a chance at a life after. You're 28 years old, Ms. Alvarado. You made terrible choices, but you're not a murderer. Not yet. Don't let Vincent turn you into one. Angelica looked at the photographs spread across the table. All those women. All dead. All connected to Vincent. She'd thought he loved her. He'd been so convincing, so passionate in his hatred of Jarrett Bolton. The stolen manuscript, the ruined career, the injustice of it all. Angelica had believed him when he said they were fighting back against corruption, against a system that protected the powerful. But it all been lies. I want full immunity, Angelica said quietly. Warren and Livingston exchanged glances. We'll have to talk to the DA. Full immunity, witness protection, and I want my testimony to be enough to put Vincent away. I'll tell you everything, but I need guarantees. Why should we believe you'll tell the truth? Lang asked. Angelica met his gaze. Because I'm terrified. Because I know Vincent is going to kill me if he gets the chance. Because I helped murder an innocent woman, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. But maybe, just maybe, if I help put Vincent away, Leslie Bolton's death won't be completely meaningless. Warren pulled out a recorder. Start from the beginning. Tell us how Vincent Brennan recruited you. Angelica took a breath and began to talk. Jarrett was in his hotel room when Officer Lang called. Mr. Bolton, we got it. Angelica Alvarado is cooperating. She's giving us everything, dates, locations, planning sessions. She's willing to testify that Vincent Brennan orchestrated the entire plot, including the plane's sabotage. Jarrett closed his eyes. What about Dan Lopez's death? She doesn't have direct evidence, but she's giving us enough to reopen that investigation. And there's more. FBI has been tracking Vincent for other suspicious deaths. This goes way beyond Leslie. How soon can you arrest him? We're putting together the warrant now. Should have him in custody by morning. He's going to run. We've got surveillance on his apartment. He's not going anywhere. But Jarrett knew better. Vincent was smart enough to have an escape plan. The moment he realized Angelica had flipped, he'd disappear. I need to do something, Jarrett said. Mr. Bolton, you need to stay out of this. I need closure. He trailed off, an idea forming. Dangerous. Probably stupid. But it might work. What are you thinking? Lang asked suspiciously. Vincent wants to see me suffer. He staged this whole elaborate plot because destroying me was more important than just killing me. So let's give him what he wants. You want to use yourself as bait. I want to give him a target he can't resist. Jarrett pulled up his laptop. I'm going to announce a press conference. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. I'm going to reveal the truth about Leslie's death, about Vincent, about everything. Live streamed, recorded, completely public. That's insane. If Vincent is the killer you think he is, he won't be able to stay away. He'll have to stop me, or at least see me one last time. And when he shows up, you'll have him. Lang was quiet for a long moment. This is a terrible idea. Do you have a better one? I'll talk to my superiors. But Bolton? If we do this, you follow our protocols exactly. You wear a wire. You stay in public. You don't play hero. I'm not a hero, Jarrett said quietly. I'm just a man who lost everything. And I want the person responsible to face justice. After Lang hung up, Jarrett began drafting the press release. But his mind was elsewhere, thinking about Leslie. They'd never had children. It had always been someday, pushed back by careers and plans and the comfortable assumption that time was infinite. Now there would be no someday. No children to carry forward Leslie's laugh, her kindness, her way of seeing the good in everyone. All that was left was this. making sure Vincent Brennan answered for what he'd done. Jarrett hit send on the press release. The announcement went to every major news outlet, every book blog, every social media platform he had access to. Best-selling author Jarrett Bolton to reveal truth about wife's death in plane crash. Press conference. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Denver Press Club. The public deserves to know what really happened to Flight 447. Within minutes, his phone exploded with calls and texts. News agencies wanting interviews. Readers expressing shock and support. His agent demanding to know what he was doing. And one text from Vincent. See you tomorrow. Jarrett smiled grimly. The trap was set. Now he just had to survive it. Chapter 6. The Wire. The Denver Press Club occupied a historic building downtown, all exposed brick and polished wood. Jarrett arrived at 8 a.m., 2 hours early, to work with Detective Livingston's team on the setup. Wire goes here, a tech specialist named Ton Shields explained, taping a small device to Jarrett's chest. Don't touch it, don't mention it, don't do anything that might reveal your recording. And if Vincent searches me, then we move in immediately. But we're hoping he'll be too focused on stopping the press conference to think that far ahead. Officer Lang appeared with coffee. Surveillance is in position. We have undercover officers in the building, plainclothes on the street, and SWAT on standby 2 blocks away. The moment Vincent makes a move, we take him down. What about the press? Jarrett asked. Real reporters are going to show up. Let them. Better cover. Vincent is less likely to try anything violent with witnesses. But Jarrett wasn't sure about that. Vincent had already murdered Leslie, killed Lopez, and was planning to eliminate Angelica. A room full of reporters might not stop him, might even appeal to his sense of drama. By 9:30, the press room was filling up. Local news crews, independent journalists, true crime bloggers. They set up cameras, tested audio, chatted amongst themselves about the mysterious announcement. Jarrett stood backstage, reviewing his prepared statement. It was mostly truth, Leslie's death, Vincent's obsession, the conspiracy. But he left out certain details, bait designed to make Vincent reveal himself. 9:45, no sign of Vincent. 9:50, still nothing. Maybe he's not coming, Lang said, though he didn't sound convinced. 9:55, Jarrett moved toward the stage entrance. And then he saw him. Vincent Brennan walked into the press room like he belonged there, wearing a press badge that had to be fake, carrying a leather satchel. He took a seat in the 3rd row, center aisle. Perfect position to see and be seen. Target acquired. Lang murmured into his radio. All units hold position. Let's see what he does. 10 a.m. Jarrett walked onto the stage. The room fell silent. Cameras turned. Microphones went live. Thank you for coming, Jarrett began, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. 2 weeks ago, my wife Leslie Curtis Bolton died in the crash of United Flight 447. The official report called it mechanical failure. But I'm here to tell you the truth. My wife was murdered. Gasps from the audience. Reporters leaning forward. Vincent sat perfectly still, expression unreadable. The man responsible is named Vincent Brennan. He's a failed writer who blamed me for his lack of success. For 7 years, he stalked me, harassed me, made threats. And when those didn't destroy me, he escalated. Jarrett pulled up a slide on the screen behind him. Vincent's photo, his history, his connection to Dan Lopez. With the help of accomplices, Vincent sabotaged Flight 447. He had my wife impersonated so I wouldn't know she was dead until it was too late. He planned to frame me for her murder, destroy my reputation, and leave me broken. Vincent's hand moved to his satchel. Every undercover officer in the room tensed. But he made a mistake. He underestimated how much I loved Leslie, how far I would go to find the truth, how relentless I could be when someone takes everything from me. Jarrett locked eyes with Vincent across the room. Vincent Brennan, you wanted to destroy me. You wanted to see me suffer, to break me down, to prove that I deserve the pain you felt. But here's the truth. You're not the victim of injustice. You're a talentless hack who couldn't accept his own failure. And rather than work harder, rather than improve your craft, you decided to tear down someone else. Vincent stood. The satchel fell open. Time slowed. Jarrett saw the gun. Small, silver, identical to the one Angelica had held in his car. "Get down!" Lang shouted. Officers converged from all directions. But Vincent was faster than they expected, fueled by rage and desperation. He raised the weapon toward the stage. Jarrett dubbed behind the podium as the first shot rang out. Chaos erupted. Reporters screaming, fleeing. Officers tackling Vincent, but not before a second shot cracked through the air. Jarrett felt something hot graze his shoulder. Pain blossomed, but he stayed down, stayed covered. "Weapon secure," someone shouted. When Jarrett finally looked up, Vincent was on the ground, surrounded by officers, the gun kicked away. Blood trickled from Jarrett's shoulder. Just a graze, nothing serious. But Vincent was laughing. Even with his face pressed to the floor, hands being cuffed, he was laughing. "You think you've won?" Vincent spat. "You think this is over? I destroyed you, Jarrett. I killed the thing you loved most. You'll never be whole again. Every day, for the rest of your life, you'll remember that I took her from you." Jarrett stood slowly, applying pressure to his shoulder. He walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at Vincent. "You're right," Jarrett said quietly. "You did destroy part of me. The part that believed in second chances, in mercy, in letting the law handle monsters like you. But you know what else you did?" Vincent glared up at him. "You reminded me who I was before Leslie. Before success. Before safety. You reminded me that I'm a survivor. And survivors don't break. They adapt. They overcome. They win." Jarrett turned to the cameras, still rolling, capturing everything. "Vincent Brennan murdered my wife. He killed Dan Lopez. He tried to kill me. And now the whole world knows. He wanted fame? He's got it. He'll be remembered forever as the pathetic coward who couldn't create, only destroy." As officers hauled Vincent away, still screaming threats and curses, Jarrett felt something shift inside him. Not closure. He'd never have that. But something else. Purpose. Direction. Leslie was gone, but her memory deserved more than revenge. It deserved a legacy. Chapter 7. The Trial. 3 months later, Jarrett sat in the courtroom gallery, watching Vincent Brennan's trial unfold. The prosecution had built an airtight case. Angelica's testimony, financial records showing payments to Dan Lopez, Vincent's own threatening messages, and social media posts. The defense tried to argue diminished capacity, years of perceived injustice driving Vincent to a break with reality. But the premeditation was too clear, the planning too detailed. On the witness stand, Angelica Alvarado looked different from the woman who'd held a gun on Jarrett. Smaller somehow, younger without the theatrical confidence. She answered the prosecutor's questions in a steady voice, explaining how Vincent had recruited her. "He told me Jarrett Bolton had ruined his life," Angelica said. "That he'd stolen Vincent's work, sabotaged his career, destroyed his chance at success. Vincent showed me rejection letters, bad reviews, evidence of what he called a conspiracy. He made it seem like we were fighting back against injustice." "And when did you realize it wasn't justice?" the prosecutor asked. "When I saw Jarrett's face after the phone call. The pain, the shock, the grief. That was real. Everything Vincent had told me was a lie. Jarrett hadn't done anything to Vincent except exist, be successful, be happy. That was Vincent's real crime. He couldn't stand someone else having what he wanted." The defense attorney tried to shake her testimony, but Angelica held firm. She'd made a deal, testimony for a reduced sentence. But more than that, she seemed determined to atone. When Jarrett took the stand, he kept his testimony factual, controlled. He described Leslie, her warmth, her intelligence, her belief in second chances. He explained his history with Vincent, the baseless accusations, the years of harassment. "Did you ever steal Vincent Brennan's manuscript?" the prosecutor asked. "No, I never saw his manuscript. I never communicated with him until after he began stalking me. His accusations were fantasy, delusion, a justification for his own failure." The defense attorney cross-examined aggressively, trying to paint Jarrett as arrogant, dismissive of Vincent's struggles. But Jarrett didn't take the bait. "I understand the pain of rejection," Jarrett said. "I was rejected by 43 agents before finding representation. My first novel was turned down by every major publisher. I know how it feels to believe you're talented and have the world disagree. But I worked harder. I improved. I earned my success. And Vincent Brennan didn't. Vincent Brennan chose to blame others instead of looking inward. That's not a writing problem. That's a character problem. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, murder for hire, attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon. The sentencing hearing was brief. Vincent showed no remorse, gave no apology. He used his final statement to rant about injustice, stolen dreams, corruption in publishing. The judge cut him off. Mr. Brennan, you didn't fail because of conspiracy. You failed because you lacked talent, discipline, and basic human decency. You murdered an innocent woman to satisfy your ego. You destroyed lives because your feelings were hurt. The court sentences you to life in prison without possibility of parole. As Vincent was led away, he locked eyes with Jarrett one last time. But there was no triumph there, no satisfaction, just emptiness. The obsession that had defined Vincent's life was over, and he had nothing left. Jarrett felt no joy in the verdict. Leslie was still gone. Lopez was still dead. The damage couldn't be undone. But justice had been served. Chapter 8, the book. 6 months after the trial, Jarrett sat in his office. The same office where Angelica had planted evidence, where Vincent's plot had nearly destroyed him. He'd reclaimed the space, made it his again. On his desk was a manuscript. Not the fictional version he'd sent to Vincent as bait, but the real story. Every detail, every emotion, every moment from the phone call to the verdict. He'd titled it The Imposter's Price. His agent had begged him not to write it. Too soon, she'd said. Too raw. Take time to heal first. But Jarrett needed to write it. Not for revenge or exposure. Vincent was already in prison. Not for money or fame. His career was secure without exploiting tragedy. He wrote it for Leslie, because her story deserved to be told. The brilliant marketing executive who believed in helping small businesses succeed. The woman who'd convinced him to try fostering dogs, which led to them adopting 3 rescues. The partner who'd supported his writing even when it meant weeks of him lost in dark plots. Leslie had been real, vibrant, full of life. Vincent had tried to erase her, make her just a pawn in his revenge plot. This book was Jarrett's way of ensuring she remained real, remained remembered. He'd also written about the others: Tamara Bond, Jody Mills, Bobby Chan, women Vincent had hurt or killed, their stories lost in the shadows. Agent Warren had provided what detail she could, and Jarrett had interviewed families, friends, anyone willing to talk. Each woman got a chapter. Each story was honored. The manuscript ended with a dedication. For Leslie, who saw the good in everyone. I'm sorry the world didn't protect you from those who saw only themselves. Jarrett's publisher had accepted the book immediately, but with one condition. All proceeds beyond Jarrett's advance would go to a foundation in Leslie's name, supporting victims of stalking and domestic terrorism. The book was scheduled for release in 3 months. Early reviews from advance copies were calling it devastating, essential, a masterwork of true crime and personal memoir. But Jarrett didn't care about reviews anymore. He'd learned the hard way that success and accolades meant nothing without people to share them with. A knock on his office door. Jarrett looked up to see Officer Lang, now Detective Lang, after his promotion. Thought you'd want to know, Lang said. Angelica Alvarado was sentenced this morning. 8 years, eligible for parole and 5 with good behavior. She's being transferred to a facility in California, part of her witness protection arrangement. She helped put Vincent away, Jarrett said. That count for something. It does. She also sends this. Lang handed over an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Mr. Bolton, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I think about Leslie every day. I think about what she might have accomplished, who she might have helped, the life she should have lived. I was weak. I let Vincent manipulate me because I wanted to believe I was fighting for something righteous. But there was nothing righteous about what we did. We were monsters, and I'll spend the rest of my life atoning. I'm using my time in prison to get my teaching degree. When I get out, I want to work with troubled youth, help them avoid the path I took. It's not enough. Nothing will ever be enough. But it's something. Your wife was a good person who died because of my choices. I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it. But I'm sorry anyway. Angelica Alvarado. Jarrett folded the letter carefully. He didn't forgive her, wasn't sure he ever could. But he recognized the attempt at redemption, however inadequate. One more thing, Lang said. We recovered Leslie's personal effects from the crash site. Her phone was damaged, but the cloud backup had some videos and photos. Thought you might want them. He handed over a thumb drive. After Lang left, Jarrett sat for a long time before plugging in the drive. He was afraid of what he'd find, afraid of the pain. But Leslie deserved to be remembered. The files were mostly mundane, work presentations, travel photos, selfies. But there was one video, dated the morning of the crash, recorded in her Dallas hotel room. Jarrett clicked play. Leslie's face filled the screen, sleep-tousled and smiling. Hey babe, I know you're probably still sleeping, but I couldn't help myself. I just got the news. We landed the Redmond account. Can you believe it? All those months of pitching, and they finally said yes. I'm so excited I can barely breathe. She paused, her expression softening. I miss you. I know it's only been 3 days, but I miss you. I can't wait to get home, to tell you everything in person, to celebrate properly. You know what? Let's do something crazy when I get back. Let's take that trip to Ireland we've been talking about. Life is too short to keep putting off the things that matter. Her smile brightened. I love you, Jarrett Bolton. See you tonight. The video ended. Jarrett sat in silence, tears streaming down his face. Leslie had been happy in her last hours. Excited about life, about the future. Vincent had stolen that from her, stolen all the experiences she'd never have, the dreams she'd never achieve. But he couldn't steal her from Jarrett's memory. Couldn't erase the 10 years they'd shared, the love they'd built. Vincent had tried to destroy Jarrett through revenge. Instead, he'd reminded him what was worth fighting for. Jarrett opened a new document. Not a book this time, but a letter of his own. Dear Leslie, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry for every moment we'll never share. But I promise you this, your death won't be meaningless. Your story will help others. Your foundation will save lives. Your memory will inspire people to be kinder, braver, better. Vincent wanted to destroy you to hurt me. Instead, he proved how remarkable you were, how much you mattered, how deep love can run. I'll never move on, but I'll move forward, because that's what you'd want. Because living well, living fully, is the best revenge against those who deal in death. I love you. Always. Jarrett. He printed the letter and placed it in a frame on his desk, where he could see it every day. Then he returned to his manuscript. There was still work to do, still stories to tell, still a life to live, even if it looked different than he'd planned. Leslie would have wanted him to keep going. So he would. Chapter 9. Legacy. 1 year after Leslie's death, the Leslie Curtis Bolton Foundation held its first annual fundraiser. Jarrett stood at the podium in a Denver hotel ballroom, looking out at 300 people who'd come to support the cause. Survivors of stalking, families who'd lost loved ones to obsessive violence, law enforcement officers who specialized in threat assessment, mental health professionals working with fixated individuals. My wife believed in second chances, Jarrett began. She believed people could change, could grow, could overcome their worst impulses. Vincent Brennan proved her wrong about that. Some people are beyond redemption. He paused, gathering himself. But most people aren't Vincent. Most people experiencing obsessive thoughts, fixation, or unhealthy attachment can be helped. Early intervention saves lives, both the person suffering and their potential victims. That's what this foundation does. We identify, we intervene, we educate. The foundation had partnered with universities to study the psychology of fixation. They'd created training programs for law enforcement to recognize warning signs. They'd established hotlines for families worried about loved ones showing obsessive behavior. In its first year, the foundation had prevented 3 potential tragedies. Individuals who'd been flagged by the program, received intervention, and stepped back from dangerous paths. 3 people who might have become the next Vincent Brennan. Three potential victims who went on living their lives, never knowing how close danger had come. Leslie didn't die for a reason, Jarrett continued. There is no reason good enough to justify her death. But we can give her death meaning by preventing others from suffering the same fate. We can honor her by building something positive from tragedy. After the speech, Jarrett mingled with attendees. A young woman approached him, nervous but determined. Mr. Bolton, my name is Grace. My brother was fixated on a coworker. It was getting scary. Your foundation helped us get him into treatment. He's doing better now. The coworker is safe. I just want to say thank you. Jarrett shook her hand, feeling the weight of those words. One life saved. One family spared the horror he'd experienced. Thank Leslie, he said quietly. This is her legacy. Later that night, Jarrett drove to the cemetery. He did this every week, bringing fresh flowers, sitting by Leslie's headstone, telling her about his day. The fundraiser was a success, he said, arranging the flowers. Iris's her favorite. We raised enough to expand the program to 3 more states. You be proud. The night was quiet, stars bright overhead. I finished the book. It comes out next month. I'm nervous about it, but I think I got it right. I think I told your story the way it deserved to be told. He paused, listening to the wind through the trees. Vincent appealed his sentence. It was denied. He'll die in prison, and honestly, I don't think about him much anymore. He's not worth the energy. You are. Building something meaningful in your name. That's worth it. Jarrett stood, touching the cold stone. I met someone. Don't worry, I'm not. It's not like that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she volunteers at the foundation, and we've been talking. Her name is Christine. She lost her sister to a stalker 5 years ago. She understands. He felt guilty admitting it, like he was betraying Leslie's memory. But he could almost hear her voice. Don't be stupid, Jarrett. Don't spend your life alone. I want you to be happy. I'll always love you, he said. Nothing changes that. But I think I'm ready to start living again. Really living, not just surviving. You want that from me, right? The stars offered no answer, but Jarrett felt a sense of peace anyway. He'd survived Vincent's revenge. He'd gotten justice. He'd honored Leslie's memory. Now it was time for the next chapter. As Jarrett drove home, his phone buzzed. A text from his agent. The Imposter's Price just hit #1 on the NYT pre-sale list. You did it. Leslie would be so proud. Jarrett smiled. The book would reach millions of readers. It would educate, inspire, warn. It would ensure Leslie's story and the stories of Vincent's other victims were never forgotten. Vincent Brennan had tried to destroy Jarrett Bolton. Instead, he'd forge him into something stronger, something unbreakable, a survivor, a fighter, a man who'd lost everything and still found a way forward. And in the end, that was the greatest revenge of all, living well despite everything, building something beautiful from the ashes, proving that love and purpose outlast hate and obsession. Vincent was in prison, his name synonymous with evil, his legacy one of destruction. Jarrett was free, Leslie's memory honored, their legacy one of hope. The bad guy lost. The good guy won. Justice was served. And somewhere, Jarrett believed, Leslie was smiling. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Floor Goes Cold. Roland Winters was a man who had built his empire on the bones of those who had crossed him. At 42, his construction company controlled half the city's infrastructure projects, but that wasn't what made people fear him. It was the methodical way he dismantled anyone who betrayed his trust. Today, however, all that mattered was the small, still form of his 3-year-old son Danny lying unconscious on their kitchen's marble floor. Victoria, Roland's voice cut through the silence of their Beverly Hills mansion like a blade. His wife appeared from the living room, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the apparent emergency, her blue dress immaculate. She moved with an odd calmness that immediately set Roland's instincts on high alert. "He just ate too much candy," Victoria said, her voice eerily steady as she looked down at their son. "He'll be fine." Roland knelt beside Danny, his contractor's hands surprisingly gentle as he checked for a pulse. The boy's breathing was shallow, his skin pale and clammy. This wasn't sugar crash. This was something else entirely. "How much candy?" Roland's gray eyes fixed on his wife with laser focus. "I don't know. A lot. You know how kids are." Victoria shrugged, but Roland caught the slight tremor in her hands as she smoothed her dress. Without another word, Roland scooped Danny into his arms and headed for his black Mercedes. Victoria followed, her heels clicking on the driveway with measured precision. During the 15-minute drive to Cedar-Sinai Medical Center, she sat in perfect silence, occasionally glancing at her phone. The emergency room moved swiftly once they arrived. Roland held Danny while nurses took vitals and started for. A young resident began asking questions about what the child had ingested, when suddenly the automatic doors opened and Dr. Trevor Holloway walked in. Roland knew the name. Victoria had mentioned him before as one of the pediatric specialists at the hospital. Tall, distinguished, with prematurely silver hair and the kind of confident bearing that came from years of saving children's lives. But when Dr. Holloway's eyes found Victoria, something shifted in his expression. The doctor's face went ashen. He took an involuntary step backward, his hand reaching for the wall to steady himself. Roland watched as the man's professional composure cracked like glass. "Nurse Patterson," Dr. Holloway whispered, never taking his eyes off Victoria. "Call security. She's back." The words hit Roland like a physical blow. The bustling emergency room seemed to freeze around them. Victoria's face had gone completely blank, but Roland caught the flash of something dangerous in her eyes. Not fear, but calculation. "I think there's been a mistake," Victoria said smoothly, but her voice had lost its earlier steadiness. Dr. Holloway was already backing toward the nurse's station, his hand fumbling for the phone. "Security to ER Bay 3. Immediately, Roland felt the world tilt beneath his feet. His mind, trained by years of business warfare to process information quickly, began connecting dots he'd never wanted to see. Victoria's unexplained absences, her detailed knowledge of medical procedures, the way she always seemed to know when he was traveling for business. "What's going on?" Roland's voice was deadly quiet, the tone that had made grown men break contracts rather than face his wrath. But before anyone could answer, Danny stirred in his arms, letting out a weak cry. The medical team immediately focused on the child, drawing blood and starting tests. Through it all, Roland watched his wife's face like a hawk studies prey. Security arrived, two large men who seemed to know exactly who they were looking for. But Victoria had already moved to Roland's side, playing the concerned mother perfectly. "There must be some confusion," she said to the guards. "I'm here with my sick child." Dr. Holloway was now behind the nurse's station, speaking rapidly into a phone. Roland caught fragments. 3 years. Thought she was gone. Yes, I'm certain. When one of the security guards approached, Roland stepped forward. His presence alone, 6 feet of controlled power in an expensive suit, made the man hesitate. "This is my wife," Roland said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Our son is having a medical emergency." The guard looked between Roland's intimidating presence and Dr. Holloway's obvious distress. In that moment of confusion, Victoria leaned close to Roland. "Darling, perhaps we should go to a different hospital. St. Mary's has excellent pediatric care." But Roland's hand closed around her wrist like a steel trap. "We're staying here," he said, "until I understand what's happening." The look that passed between them was electric with unspoken threat. Victoria had always known her husband was dangerous, but she thought she could control him with the careful manipulation she perfected over their 7 years of marriage. Now, seeing the cold calculation in his eyes, she realized she might have miscalculated. Dr. Holloway had finished his phone call and was approaching with 2 additional security personnel and what appeared to be a hospital administrator. Roland's grip on Victoria's wrist tightened imperceptibly. Mr. Winters, the administrator began, I'm afraid there might be a situation we need to discuss regarding your wife's medical history, Dr. Holloway interrupted, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Mrs. Winters has a history at this hospital that poses certain concerns. Roland looked down at Danny, who was now receiving oxygen and looking slightly better. The blood tests would take time. He had time to get answers. Concerns about what? Roland's question was directed at Dr. Holloway, but his eyes never left Victoria's face. The silence stretched until Victoria finally spoke, her voice regaining some of its earlier confidence. This is obviously a case of mistaken identity. I've never been a patient here before today. But Dr. Holloway shook his head slowly. Not a patient, he said. An employee. The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water, creating ripples that would eventually become a tsunami. Roland felt something cold and deadly settle in his chest. His wife, his carefully chosen, perfectly presented wife, had worked at this hospital and had somehow left under circumstances so dire that her mere presence warranted security. What kind of employee? Roland asked, though part of him already knew he wouldn't like the answer. Pediatric nurse, Dr. Holloway said, until 3 years ago, when she was terminated for irregularities in patient care. Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. The woman Roland had married, the devoted mother, the society wife who hosted charity galas and spoke passionately about helping disadvantaged children, was someone else entirely. You have no proof of anything, Victoria hissed, dropping all pretense of confusion. Dr. Holloway's laugh was bitter. No proof? 3 children went into unexplained medical distress during your shifts. 3 children who had no reason to crash the way they did. The investigation was ongoing when you simply disappeared. Roland's world crystallized into perfect, terrible clarity. The unexplained bruises on Danny that Victoria always had ready explanations for. The way their son sometimes seemed drugged after spending time alone with his mother. The medical knowledge she displayed at odd moments. And now Danny, unconscious on their kitchen floor after eating too much candy. Without warning, Roland spun to face his wife fully. The movement was so sudden and predatory that both security guards stepped forward, but Roland's attention was focused entirely on Victoria. What did you give him? His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the promise of violence. Victoria straightened, and for the first time since he'd known her, Roland saw who she really was. The mask of devoted wife and mother was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. Nothing that would permanently hurt him, she said with chilling calm. He's my son, too. But Roland caught the tell, the slight emphasis on permanently. His contractor's instincts, honed by years of detecting structural weaknesses, immediately identified the flaw in her statement. This isn't the first time, is it? He said. The silence was his answer. Chapter 2. Foundation Cracks. Roland Winters hadn't become one of the most feared men in Los Angeles by accident. His background was built on a foundation of calculated brutality that few people fully understood. Raised in the foster system after his mother died of a drug overdose when he was 8, he'd learned early that survival meant being harder, smarter, and more ruthless than everyone around him. His first kill had been at 16, a foster father who'd made the mistake of touching his younger sister Lily. Roland had made it look like an accident, and the insurance money had paid for Lily's education. She was now a successful attorney who'd never asked questions about her benefactor's methods. By 25, Roland owned his first construction company. By 30, he controlled the city council through a combination of legitimate business dealings and carefully applied pressure. The 3 men who had tried to compete with him in those early days had simply disappeared. Their bodies were now part of several building foundations throughout the city. Victoria had been different, or so he'd thought. He'd met her at a charity auction 5 years ago, where she was representing the Children's Hospital as a volunteer. She was beautiful, articulate, and seemed genuinely passionate about helping sick children. When she'd told him about her background in pediatric nursing before becoming a full-time volunteer, it had only made him more attracted to her intelligence and compassion. Their courtship had been perfect. Victoria had been interested in his business, but not grasping, supportive but not clingy. When she'd gotten pregnant with Danny 2 years into their marriage, Roland had felt something he'd never experienced before: complete contentment. Now, standing in the hospital corridor while Danny stabilized, Roland realized that everything he'd thought he knew about his life was a carefully constructed lie. "Sir," the administrator was trying to get his attention. "Perhaps we could discuss this in private?" Roland nodded curtly. He needed information, and he needed it without Victoria's interference. "Victoria, stay with Danny." But as he turned to follow the administrator, Victoria grabbed his arm. "Roland, you have to understand." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then back at her face. In that moment, Victoria saw something in her husband's eyes that made her blood freeze. It wasn't anger. It was the complete absence of emotion that preceded violence. "Take your hand off me," he said quietly. Victoria released him immediately, but the damage was done. Roland had seen her flinch, had recognized the fear in her eyes. Whatever game she'd been playing, she knew she'd lost. In the administrator's office, Roland listened as a clearer picture emerged. Victoria Holloway, not Crane, as she told him her maiden name was, had been a pediatric nurse at Cedars-Sinai for 2 years. During her tenure, there had been an unusual cluster of children who'd experienced mysterious medical episodes during her shifts. Dr. Holloway, Trevor, was leading the investigation, the administrator explained. He was convinced that someone was deliberately causing these incidents, but the evidence was circumstantial. "What kind of incidents?" Roland asked. "Children who should have been stable suddenly crashing. Unexplained seizures. Respiratory distress in kids who'd been breathing normally minutes before." The administrator paused. In each case, Victoria was the last person to check on them before the episodes occurred. Roland absorbed this information with the same methodical precision he applied to structural engineering. And she just left? Disappeared. One day, she simply didn't show up for a shift. When we tried to contact her, her apartment was empty, her phone disconnected. It was like she never existed. "Except she married me 6 months later," Roland said grimly. The administrator's face showed recognition dawning. "Oh my God, she targeted you specifically." Roland had already reached that conclusion. Victoria's sudden appearance at the charity auction, her perfect knowledge of what would attract him, her careful cultivation of their relationship, none of it had been coincidence. What did Dr. Holloway's investigation conclude? Officially? Inconclusive. Unofficially, the administrator leaned forward. Trevor was convinced she was using the children to practice, testing different drugs, different methods, like she was experimenting. The word hit Roland like a physical blow. Experimenting. On children. And then she disappeared and found herself a husband with money, power, and a child of his own to practice on. "I need to see her employment file," Roland said. "I'm not sure I can." Roland's stare cut off the objection. Men didn't tell Roland Winters what he couldn't have. "You can, and you will." 20 minutes later, Roland was staring at a photograph that made his blood run cold. The woman in the employee ID photo looked like Victoria, but younger and with brown hair instead of blonde. But it was the name that stopped his heart: Victoria Holloway. Holloway, the same last name as Dr. Trevor Holloway. "They're related," Roland said. The administrator checked the file. Dr. Holloway never mentioned any family connection to Victoria Crane. Because her name isn't Crane. It's Holloway. Roland's mind was racing through implications. They're working together. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Dr. Holloway's reaction hadn't been recognition of a dangerous former employee. It had been shock at seeing his accomplice in a place where she shouldn't be. The call to security wasn't to protect the hospital from Victoria. It was to protect Victoria from being discovered. Roland stood abruptly. "I need to get back to my son." But as he reached the door, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Parking garage, level 3. Come alone, or Danny will have another accident." Roland stared at the message, his jaw clenching. Victoria wasn't just a child abuser. She was actively threatening his son to maintain control of the situation. She'd made her first fatal mistake. Chapter 3: Blueprint for Destruction. Roland pocketed his phone and walked back toward the emergency room with the measured stride of a predator who'd finally identified his prey. His mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating angles and possibilities with the same precision he used to demolish condemned buildings. Danny was awake now, sitting up in his hospital bed and looking confused but healthy. The color had returned to his cheeks, and his breathing was normal. Victoria sat beside him, the picture of maternal concern, but Roland could see the tension in her shoulders. "Daddy!" Danny reached for him with small arms, and Roland felt a surge of protective fury, so intense it took all his self-control not to grab Victoria by the throat right there in the pediatric ward. "Hey, buddy," Roland said, forcing his voice to remain gentle as he lifted his son. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. Mommy gave me special medicine because I was being bad." The words hit the room like a grenade. Victoria's face went white, but she recovered quickly. "He's confused," she said smoothly. Children often mix up memories when they're sick. But Roland had caught the telltale sign, the way Danny's eyes darted to his mother with unmistakable fear before quickly looking away. It was a behavior pattern Roland recognized from his own childhood in the foster system. The look of a child who'd learned that speaking up brought punishment. Dr. Holloway had returned and was standing near the nurse's station, watching the family tableau with poorly concealed anxiety. When his eyes met Roland's, the man actually flinched. "The blood work came back normal," Dr. Holloway said, approaching the bed with obvious reluctance. "Whatever was in his system has metabolized out." "What would cause those symptoms temporarily?" Roland asked, his tone conversational. "Several things. Mild sedatives, antihistamines in large doses, certain herbal supplements." Dr. Holloway trailed off, clearly realizing he was providing a roadmap for child abuse. Roland's phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. 5 minutes. "Victoria," Roland said, his voice carrying just enough edge to make her look up sharply. "Why don't you take Danny to get some ice cream from the cafeteria? I need to discuss his treatment with Dr. Holloway." Victoria hesitated, clearly torn between maintaining her maternal facade and avoiding leaving Roland alone with her accomplice. But refusing would raise questions she couldn't answer. "Of course," she said, lifting Danny from Roland's arms. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's find you something yummy." As soon as they were out of sight, Roland turned to Dr. Holloway with the full force of his attention. The man actually took a step backward. "How long have you been sleeping with my wife?" Roland asked conversationally. Dr. Holloway's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "I what? I don't." "Wrong answer," Roland said. "Try again." "Mr. Winters, I think there's been a misunderstanding." Roland moved closer, and Dr. Holloway found himself backed against the medication cart. The text messages, the coordinated story, the way you're both trying to control this situation. Either you're sleeping with her, or she has something on you that makes you dance to her tune. Which is it? Dr. Holloway's professional composure cracked completely. "You don't understand," he whispered. God, you have no idea what she's capable of." "Enlighten me." 3 years ago, I was conducting research on pediatric pain management, experimental protocols, testing new drug combinations on terminally ill children with their parents' consent. Everything was legal, approved by the ethics board. Roland waited, saying nothing. Experience had taught him that scared people filled silence with confessions. Victoria was one of my best nurses. Intelligent, dedicated, seemed to genuinely care about the children. When she suggested certain modifications to the protocols, I listened. "What kind of modifications?" "Testing on healthy children, just to see what would happen." She said it would help us understand the drugs better, make the protocols safer for the terminal patients. Dr. Holloway's voice was barely audible. I was so focused on the potential breakthrough, I convinced myself it was justified. Roland felt something cold and deadly settle in his chest. "You experimented on healthy children." It started small, mild sedatives to test consciousness levels, then stronger compounds to test pain responses. We told the parents the children were having complications from routine procedures. Dr. Holloway was sweating now, his confession pouring out like blood from a wound. Victoria documented everything meticulously. She said it was for science. But it wasn't, was it? Roland's voice was deadly quiet. I realized too late that she wasn't interested in the medical applications. She was studying their reactions for her own purposes. The way different drugs affected different children. What caused the most fear versus the most compliance. Dr. Holloway looked up at Roland with haunted eyes. She was learning how to hurt children more effectively. Roland absorbed this information with the same methodical precision he applied to demolishing structures. Find the load-bearing supports, then remove them systematically until the entire building collapsed. And when you tried to stop her, she had recordings, video evidence of my involvement. She showed me just enough to make it clear that if anyone investigated what happened in that pediatric ward, I would go to prison for child abuse while she walked away with a slap on the wrist. So you helped her disappear. Dr. Holloway nodded miserably. I gave her a new identity, helped her create a background that would pass casual inspection. I hoped she would just vanish and never surface again. Instead, she found herself a wealthy husband with a child of his own. When I saw her today, I panicked. I never thought she would be so brazen as to bring a victim to my hospital. Roland's phone buzzed. Another message. Time's up. Parking garage. Now. Dr. Holloway, Roland said, his voice carrying the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. You're going to help me destroy her. I can't. You don't understand. She has everything documented. If she goes down, she'll take me with her. Roland smiled, and Dr. Holloway felt his blood turn to ice water. It wasn't a human expression. It was the smile of something that ate human expressions for breakfast. Doctor, Roland said conversationally, I've made men disappear for much less than what you've done. The only reason you're still breathing is that I need you functional for the next phase. But make no mistake, when this is over, your life as you know it ends. The only question is whether you spend the rest of it in witness protection or in a shallow grave. Dr. Holloway stared at the man who looked like a successful businessman, but spoke like something that crawled out of the deepest parts of hell. What do you want me to do? He whispered. Roland handed him a business card. My private number. When she contacts you, and she will, you do exactly what I tell you to do. No improvisation, no attempts to protect yourself. You follow my instructions precisely, or I will make your death so slow that you'll beg me to let you confess to every child. Dr. Holloway took the card with shaking hands. And Doctor, Roland added, already walking toward the elevator. If my son suffers so much as a scraped knee while this plays out, I will personally ensure that your death is artistic enough to be featured in medical journals. As the elevator doors closed, Roland allowed himself a moment of pure, cold satisfaction. He had his target identified, his leverage in place, and his first asset recruited. Victoria thought she was playing chess, but Roland had been playing a much more deadly game for much longer. Phase 1 was complete. Time for Phase 2. Chapter 4. Structural Analysis. The parking garage was a concrete monument to urban decay, with flickering fluorescent lights that cast sickly shadows between the support pillars. Roland found Victoria on level 3, standing beside a black BMW that wasn't his car. She was no longer bothering with the concerned mother act. Her posture was predatory, alert. You're late, she said without turning around. Traffic, Roland replied, though they both knew he'd been gathering intelligence. Victoria smiled and finally faced him. In the harsh lighting, with her maternal mask completely abandoned, she looked like a different person entirely. Her blue eyes were cold and calculating, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. So now you know, she said. The question is what you're going to do about it. Roland studied her like he was evaluating a building's structural integrity before demolition. That depends on what exactly I know. Don't play games, Roland. You spoke with the administrator. You interrogated poor Trevor. I used to work here under a different name, and there were some disagreements about my methods. Is Trevor your brother, cousin, or just someone whose career you decided to destroy for fun? Victoria's laugh was like ice crystals forming. Trevor is my ex-husband. Actually, met him in nursing school. Married him when he was an idealistic resident who thought he could save every child in the world. It was adorable, really. The casual way she discussed destroying her ex-husband's life told Roland everything he needed to know about Victoria's capacity for long-term planning and revenge. She wasn't impulsive. She was methodical. And Danny? Roland asked. Danny is my son, too. I would never do anything to permanently harm him. Victoria stepped closer, and Roland caught the scent of her perfume, something expensive and cloying. But children need to learn discipline, Roland. They need to understand consequences. By drugging them unconscious? By teaching them that actions have reactions, that the world isn't safe, that mommy and daddy might not always be there to protect them. Victoria's smile was serene. Danny was getting too comfortable, too confident. He needed to learn that security is an illusion. Roland felt something shift inside his chest, like tectonic plates finding a new alignment. This wasn't just child abuse. It was systematic psychological torture designed to create trauma and dependency. How long, he asked. Since he was 18 months old. Nothing dramatic, just enough to keep him properly anxious. A little Benadryl to make him drowsy and disoriented. Some mild pain medication to teach him that feeling good is temporary. Basic conditioning. The matter-of-fact way she described torturing their toddler made Roland's vision blur red around the edges. But he kept his voice level professional. And this was all practice for what? Victoria tilted her head, studying him. For you, eventually. Did you really think I married you for your sparkling personality? Your means to an end, Roland. A very wealthy, very powerful means to an end. What end? I need someone with your resources and connections to expand my work. The hospital was too limiting, too many ethical committees and oversight boards. But with your money and influence, I could set up something much more comprehensive. Roland's blood turned to ice as the full scope of her plan became clear. A private facility for troubled children, somewhere parents could send their difficult kids for behavioral modification. No pesky insurance companies or state oversight. Just me, my methods, and unlimited test subjects. Victoria's eyes were bright with anticipation. I've already identified several potential properties. Isolated locations where no one would hear anything inconvenient. The woman Roland had married, the mother of his child, was describing a systematic child torture operation with the enthusiasm of someone planning a vacation. And Trevor's role in this? Trevor owes me. His cooperation isn't optional. Victoria's expression hardened. Just like yours isn't. Because you think you have leverage over me? Victoria smiled and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through what appeared to be a video gallery and selected one. The screen showed Danny's bedroom from a hidden camera angle, with the boy sleeping peacefully in his race car bed. I have cameras throughout our house, Roland. 7 years of footage of you being an absent father, traveling constantly for business, leaving your son with nannies and babysitters, missing birthdays, school events, bedtime stories. Victoria's voice took on a mock-sympathetic tone. And now, evidence of you attacking me in a hospital parking garage when I was just trying to discuss our son's medical needs. Roland realized she was recording their conversation with a second phone positioned near the BMW side mirror. Any family court in the country would give me full custody after seeing the evidence I compiled. And once Danny is exclusively in my care. Victoria shrugged. Well, accidents happen to children all the time. The threat was crystal clear. Roland could expose her, but she would disappear with Danny before any court proceedings could protect his son. And wherever she took him would be a place designed specifically for hurting children. What do you want? Roland asked. $50 million transferred to an account I'll provide. Purchase of the property I've selected in Montana. And your complete cooperation in establishing my facility. Victoria's smile was triumphant. In exchange, I continue being the perfect wife and mother, and Danny grows up safe and healthy. And if I refuse, then you'll never see either of us again. And Danny will become my primary research subject for the rest of his very short life. Roland nodded slowly, as if considering her terms. In reality, he was calculating angles of attack, identifying weak points in her plan, and determining the most efficient way to ensure that Victoria never threatened another child. I'll need time to arrange that kind of transfer, he said. You have 48 hours. And Roland? Victoria stepped close enough that her breath touched his face. Don't even think about trying to outmaneuver me. I've been planning this for 7 years. Every possible move you might make has already been accounted for. Roland looked down at the woman who'd shared his bed, borne his child, and fooled him completely for years. You're probably right, he said. Victoria's smile faltered slightly at his easy capitulation, but she recovered quickly. Smart man. I always knew you were intelligent enough to recognize a superior opponent. As Roland walked back to his car, he was already mentally reviewing his resources. Victoria was right about one thing. She'd been planning this for years and had anticipated most conventional responses. But Victoria had made one critical error in her calculations. She'd assumed that Roland was conventional. By the time Roland reached his Mercedes, he'd already identified 3 different ways to kill her that would look like accidents, mapped out the locations of 6 men who owed him favors dangerous enough to murder 4, and calculated exactly how long it would take to make her disappear so completely that not even dental records would remain. Victoria thought she was playing chess, but Roland had been playing a much older game, one where the only rule was that the strongest player left the table alive. The 48-hour countdown had begun, but it wouldn't take Roland nearly that long to end this. Chapter 5. Load-bearing walls. Roland drove home through the winding streets of Beverly Hills with the methodical precision of someone following a blueprint. His mansion sat on 3 acres of perfectly manicured grounds, surrounded by walls that offered privacy and security. What Victoria didn't know was that those walls had been designed for more than keeping out unwanted visitors. They were also excellent for keeping things in. Danny was exhausted from his hospital adventure and fell asleep in the car before they reached the gate. Roland carried his son upstairs, noting how the boy's small body seemed to relax completely only when Victoria wasn't in sight. Another data point filed away for future reference. He'll be more tired than usual for the next day or 2, Victoria said, following them upstairs. She'd seamlessly slipped back into her maternal persona the moment they'd returned to public view. Side effects from whatever made him sick. Roland tucked Danny into bed and kissed his forehead. Sleep tight, buddy. As they walked downstairs, Victoria's phone chimed with a text message. She glanced at it and smiled. Trevor wants to meet tomorrow. He's concerned about our situation. I'm sure he is, Roland replied. Would you like a drink? I think we should discuss your proposal properly. Victoria looked surprised, but pleased. That sounds civilized. Roland poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon and handed Victoria a glass of wine, her favorite vintage from his personal collection. They settled in his study, a room lined with architectural drawings and construction awards that spoke to his legitimate business success. To new partnerships, Victoria said, raising her glass. Roland nodded and drank, studying his wife over the rim of his glass. She was beautiful, intelligent, and completely without conscience. Under different circumstances, he might have admired her calculating nature. Instead, he was planning to use it against her. Tell me about the Montana property, he said. Victoria brightened, clearly enjoying the opportunity to discuss her vision. It's a former boarding school, closed 15 years ago after some financial irregularities. Isolated, self-contained, with dormitories that could house up to 60 children. The local community is small and economically depressed. They'd welcome any business that brought jobs. How many children are you planning to treat? Initially, maybe 20. Carefully selected cases from wealthy families who want their problems to disappear quietly. Children with behavioral issues, developmental delays, anything that makes them inconvenient. Victoria's eyes gleamed. The parents would pay premium rates for specialized, discreet care. Roland nodded, as if considering the business model. And your research protocols? Much more comprehensive than what I could do at the hospital. Pain tolerance studies, psychological conditioning experiments, pharmaceutical testing. We could advance pediatric medicine by decades. The casual way she discussed torturing children for profit made Roland's hand tighten on his glass. But he kept his expression neutral, even encouraging. Would you want to begin operations? Within 6 months, I already have potential staff identified, people with the right combination of medical training and flexible ethics. Trevor will handle the legitimate medical oversight, and I'll manage the actual research. Roland set down his glass and walked to the window overlooking his pool. The water was lit from below, creating an ethereal blue glow in the darkness. "Victoria," he said without turning around, "what happened to the 3 children at the hospital?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Roland could hear the sharp intake of Victoria's breath, followed by the soft clink of her wine glass being set down. "What do you mean?" she asked carefully. "The 3 children who had medical episodes during your shifts. The ones Trevor was investigating. What actually happened to them?" The silence stretched until Roland finally turned around. Victoria was sitting perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. "They recovered," she said finally. "All of them? Of course. I would never." "Victoria." Roland's voice cut through her protestation like a blade. "What happened to them?" This time the silence was longer. Victoria seemed to be weighing her options, calculating risks and benefits. Finally, she smiled. A real smile, not the manufactured warmth she usually displayed. "You really want to know?" Roland nodded. "The first one was just an accident. A miscalculation with the sedative dosage. But watching him struggle, seeing how the drugs affected his system, Victoria's voice took on a dreamy quality. It was educational. So the second time was intentional. And the third, they died. They contributed to medical science. Their families received large settlement payments for the hospital's negligence. Everyone benefited. Roland absorbed this information with the same methodical precision he'd applied to learning construction techniques. Victoria wasn't just planning to hurt children. She was planning to kill them, systematically and for profit. And you documented everything? Meticulously. Video recordings, physiological data, psychological assessments. The complete records are stored in a secure location along with evidence of Trevor's involvement. Victoria's smile widened. "Insurance against future problems." Roland nodded slowly. "Show me." Victoria looked surprised. "Excuse me?" "The documentation. If we're going to be partners, I need to understand the scope of your work." Victoria hesitated, clearly torn between pride in her achievements and caution about revealing too much. But her narcissism won out. "Very well, but this stays between us." She retrieved a laptop from her purse and powered it on. The screen displayed a folder system organized with obsessive precision. Subject files, video recordings, medical data, financial records. Victoria clicked on one of the video files. Roland forced himself to watch 30 seconds of a 7-year-old boy being systematically tortured while Victoria provided clinical narration. When she paused the video, his expression remained perfectly controlled. "Impressive documentation," he said. Victoria beamed with pride. Each subject provided unique insights into pain tolerance, fear responses, and psychological conditioning. "The data is invaluable." Roland walked back to the window, ostensibly to refill his drink. In reality, he was activating a hidden recording system built into his study's walls. Every word of their conversation was now being documented with professional-grade audio and video equipment. "Victoria," he said, returning to his chair, "I think you may have found the perfect partner." Her smile was radiant. "I knew you'd understand eventually. We're going to accomplish something truly revolutionary." Roland raised his glass in a toast. To revolution. As Victoria drank, Roland reflected on the irony of the situation. She thought she'd trapped him with threats and blackmail, but she'd actually provided him with everything he needed to destroy her completely. The recordings of her confessions, combined with the evidence on her laptop, would be more than sufficient to ensure she never hurt another child. But Roland wasn't interested in simply stopping Victoria. He was going to make sure she experienced every bit of fear and helplessness she'd inflicted on her victims. The real game was just beginning. Chapter 6. Demolition Planning. The next morning, Roland woke before dawn and made his way to the gym in his basement. The space had been designed for more than fitness. It was where he came to think through complex problems that required violent solutions. As he worked through his routine, lifting weights with mechanical precision, his mind arranged the pieces of his plan like a master chess player. setting up an endgame. Victoria was still sleeping when he returned upstairs. She'd been unusually affectionate the night before, clearly believing she'd won their psychological battle. Roland had played the part of the defeated husband perfectly, even allowing her to think her seduction had been effective rather than nauseating. Danny was already awake, sitting in his room and playing quietly with toy trucks. The boy looked up when Roland entered, and the mixture of hope and wariness in his expression broke something inside his father's chest. "Hey, buddy," Roland said, sitting on the edge of the small bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Danny said softly. "Daddy, why did Mommy give me medicine when I wasn't sick?" The question hit Roland like a physical blow. Despite Victoria's careful conditioning, their son was beginning to understand that something was wrong with his mother's behavior. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," Roland said carefully. "But I promise you, Danny, no one is ever going to give you medicine unless you really need it." Danny nodded, but Roland could see the confusion in his eyes. The boy was trying to reconcile his love for his mother with his growing awareness that she wasn't safe. "Daddy," Danny's voice was even smaller now. "Am I bad?" "What?" "No, Danny. Why would you think that?" "Because Mommy says I need to be punished when I'm bad. And she gives me the sleepy medicine when I'm being bad." Roland felt white-hot rage flood through his system, followed immediately by ice-cold calculation. Victoria hadn't just been drugging their son. She'd been convincing him that he deserved it. "Listen to me very carefully," Roland said, taking Danny's small hands in his own. "You're not bad. You have never been bad. And no one has the right to hurt you for any reason." Danny's eyes filled with tears, and Roland pulled his son into a fierce hug. Over the boy's shoulder, he caught sight of Victoria standing in the doorway, watching them with an unreadable expression. "How touching," she said. "But I think Danny needs to get ready for preschool." Roland released his son and stood, putting himself between Danny and Victoria. "Actually, I thought we'd spend the day together. Father-son time." Victoria's smile was sharp. "Danny needs routine, Roland. Consistency is important for children." "I agree completely," Roland said, "which is why from now on, I'll be handling all decisions regarding Danny's schedule, his activities, and his medical care." The standoff stretched between them while Danny watched from his bed, clearly sensing the tension even if he didn't understand its source. "We discussed this last night," Victoria said carefully. "I thought we'd reached an understanding about responsibilities." "We did, and I'm taking responsibility for my son's welfare." Roland's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Permanently." Victoria's mask slipped slightly, revealing a flash of pure fury before she recovered her composure. "I think you're being emotional, darling. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss. Danny stays with me today." After a tense breakfast where Victoria maintained her maternal facade while Roland watched her every movement, she finally left for what she claimed was a spa appointment. Roland immediately called his head of security, Marcus Chun, one of the few men in Los Angeles who knew exactly what Roland was capable of and had never judged him for it. "I need complete surveillance on my wife," Roland said without preamble. "Where she goes, who she meets, what she does. And I need it starting now." "How complete?" Marcus asked. In their working relationship, this was code for asking whether the surveillance was for intelligence gathering or target assessment. "Complete enough to protect my son," Roland replied, which was code for target assessment. "Understood. Anything else?" "How quickly can you have our Montana contacts compile a full background on a closed boarding school property? Something that's been on the market for 15 years. By tonight if it's important." "It's important." After ending the call, Roland took Danny to his office building downtown. The boy was fascinated by the construction equipment visible from the 42nd floor windows, and Roland found himself actually relaxing for the first time in 24 hours as he explained how cranes worked and buildings grew. "Daddy, do you build everything?" Danny asked, pressing his face against the glass. "Just the important things," Roland replied, which was more truth than poetry. His construction company was responsible for most of the city's critical infrastructure, giving him access and influence that few people fully understood. His private phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Having lunch with Trevor to discuss our timeline. See you tonight. Roland smiled and forwarded the message to Marcus. Within minutes, his security chief responded with an address and confirmation that surveillance was in place. An hour later, Marcus called with an update. Your wife isn't at the restaurant she mentioned. She's at a storage facility in Glendale, and she's not alone. Trevor, negative. Unknown male, approximately 35, expensive suit, drives a Mercedes with government plates. Roland felt pieces clicking into place. Government plates? DMV shows the car registered to the Department of Health and Human Services, Child Protective Services Division. The implications hit Roland like a sledgehammer. Victoria wasn't just planning to expand her operation. She was already cultivating relationships within the system designed to protect children. Someone inside CPS was either helping her or was already under her control. I need everything you can find on whoever she's meeting with, Roland said. Background, finances, family weaknesses. Everything. Already on it. But boss, there's something else you should know. What? The storage facility? It's registered under the name Victoria Crane. She's been paying for it since before she married you. Roland ended the call and walked to his window, looking down at the city spread below him like a model he was preparing to rebuild. Victoria had been planning this operation for longer than their entire marriage. She'd chosen him specifically because his resources and connections would be useful, and she'd spent years documenting his behavior to ensure her leverage. But she'd made one critical error in her planning. She'd assumed that Roland's love for his son made him vulnerable, that his paternal instincts would force him to comply with her demands rather than risk losing Danny. She was right about his love for Danny, but she was catastrophically wrong about what that love would make him do. Roland's phone rang, and Dr. Trevor Holloway's name appeared on the screen. Mr. Winters? We need to meet. Tonight. There are things about Victoria that you don't know, and if we don't stop her soon, a lot more children are going to die. Roland smiled, watching his reflection superimposed over the city skyline. Victoria thought she was playing a complex game of manipulation and control, but she'd actually assembled all the pieces Roland needed to destroy not just her, but the entire network she'd built around her operation. Doctor, Roland said, I think it's time we had a conversation about exactly what you're willing to do to make this right. The demolition phase was about to begin. Chapter 7. Controlled Explosions. Trevor Holloway looked like a man who hadn't slept in days when he met Roland at a 24-hour diner in Westwood. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, his hands shaking slightly as he wrapped them around a coffee cup like it was an anchor. She's accelerating the timeline, Trevor said without preamble. The Montana facility, the new victims, everything is moving faster than she originally planned. Roland sat across from him, noting the dark circles under the doctor's eyes and the nervous way he kept glancing at the diner's windows. What changed? You did. She thinks you're going to comply, but she doesn't trust it. Victoria never trusts anyone completely. Trevor leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. She's planning to take Danny and disappear within the week, with or without your cooperation. Where? The Montana property. She's already arranged for a small staff to begin operations immediately. If she gets Danny there, Trevor's voice broke. That place is designed to be invisible. No oversight, no inspections, no way for anyone to trace what happens inside. Roland absorbed this information with characteristic calm, though inside he felt the familiar coldness that preceded violence. Who's helping her? Trevor pulled out his phone and showed Roland a photograph taken from a distance. It showed Victoria talking animatedly with a heavy-set man in a suit outside the storage facility. Robert Klein, senior case worker with Child Protective Services. Victoria has been cultivating him for 2 years, feeding him information about troubled children who might benefit from specialized care. He knows what she's planning. Not the details, but he knows enough. Victoria has shown him carefully edited documentation of her success stories, children who were supposedly helped by her methods. She's convinced him that traditional therapy is inadequate for severe behavioral problems. Roland studied the photograph, memorizing the man's face. And he has the authority to remove children from their homes. More than that, he can authorize placement in private facilities with minimal court oversight, especially if the parents are deemed unfit or dangerous. Trevor's hands were shaking more noticeably now. She's built a pipeline, Roland. Parents who ask too many questions about their children's injuries get investigated by CPS. When they're found to be abusive, their children get placed in Victoria's care. The scope of Victoria's operation was even more sophisticated than Roland had realized. She wasn't just planning to hurt individual children. She was systematically corrupting the system designed to protect them. How many children are already involved? I don't know for certain, but the storage facility contains medical records for at least 15 children, all supposedly receiving specialized treatment at various private facilities. Trevor pulled up another photo on his phone. This is from inside the storage unit. Victoria doesn't know I have access, but I've been documenting everything. The image showed rows of filing cabinets and boxes labeled with clinical precision. Roland could see medical equipment, video recording devices, and what appear to be pharmaceutical supplies. She's preparing for full-scale operations, Roland said. Worse than that, she's preparing to franchise the operation. The Montana facility is just the pilot program. If it's successful, she plans to establish similar facilities in other states. Roland felt something shift inside his chest, like tectonic plates finding a new and more dangerous alignment. Victoria wasn't just a child abuser. She was an entrepreneur planning to industrialize child torture. Trevor, Roland said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, I need you to do exactly what I tell you when I tell you to do it. No questions, no hesitation, no attempts to protect yourself. Do you understand? Trevor nodded frantically. What do you want me to do? First, you're going to call Victoria and tell her that I've been asking questions about her medical background. Express concern that I might be planning to expose her operation. That will make her paranoid. She might accelerate her timeline even more. That's the point. I want her off balance and making mistakes. Roland pulled out his phone and showed Trevor a number. When she contacts you again, and she will, you're going to arrange a meeting at the storage facility. Tell her you have new evidence that could implicate both of you, and you need to destroy it immediately. She'll suspect a trap. She'll suspect betrayal, but her arrogance will convince her that she can handle whatever you're planning. Roland's smile was cold and predatory. Victoria's greatest weakness is that she believes she's the smartest person in any room. Trevor stared at him with growing understanding. You're going to be waiting at the storage facility. Among other things, Roland stood and placed a $20 bill on the table. Trevor, what happened to the children at the hospital, all of them, is going to become public knowledge. The only question is whether you're remembered as an accomplice or as the whistleblower who helped stop a monster. As Roland walked toward the diner's exit, Trevor called after him. What about the man from CPS? Klein. Roland paused at the door. Mr. Klein will be dealt with appropriately. 3 hours later, Roland was in his office when Marcus called with an update. Your wife received a call from Dr. Holloway approximately 30 minutes ago. She immediately left her hotel and is currently driving toward Glendale. We also have complete background information on Robert Klein. What did you find? Divorced, 2 children he rarely sees, gambling debts totaling approximately $200,000. He's been receiving regular cash payments from a shell company that traces back to your wife. How regular? Monthly for the past 18 months. Enough to cover his debts and maintain his lifestyle, but not enough to be financially independent. Roland nodded. Klein was a classic asset, compromised, dependent, and expendable. Victoria had probably been planning to eliminate him once her operation was fully established. Where's Klein now? His office. Normal workday. No indication he knows anything unusual is happening. Good. What about the Montana property? Purchased 3 days ago through another shell company. Work crews arrived yesterday to begin renovations. The local sheriff's department has been told it's going to be a private retreat for wealthy families. Everything was moving exactly as Roland had anticipated. Victoria was rushing to implement her plan, making herself vulnerable in the process. But Roland had one more piece to put in place before the final phase could begin. Marcus, I need you to pick up Danny from preschool and take him to the safe house in Malibu. Tell him it's a special vacation with Uncle Marcus while Daddy handles some important business. Security level? Maximum. No one gets near him except you and the team. And Marcus? Roland's voice carried the weight of absolute command. If anyone tries to take my son, anyone, you have my authorization to use whatever force is necessary. Understood. As Roland ended the call, he reflected on the irony of the situation. Victoria thought she was moving pieces around a chessboard, manipulating her ex-husband and controlling her current husband through threats and blackmail. But she'd actually provided Roland with everything he needed to destroy not just her, but the entire network of accomplices and enablers she'd built around her operation. The controlled demolition was about to begin, and when it was over, there wouldn't be enough left of Victoria's world to fill a shoebox. Chapter 8. Total Structural Collapse. The Glendale storage facility looked innocent enough from the outside. Rows of identical units behind chain-link fencing, designed for people storing household goods and seasonal decorations. Unit 247 contained something much darker, and by 9 p.m., it would become the site of the most carefully orchestrated destruction Roland had ever planned. Roland arrived 2 hours early, using bolt cutters provided by Marcus to gain access through a service entrance. The security cameras had been disabled through methods that Marcus assured him would leave no traceable evidence. Roland made his way to the unit's rear access point and settled in to wait. At 8:45 p.m., Trevor's Mercedes pulled into the facility parking lot. Victoria's BMW arrived 3 minutes later. Roland watched through a small gap in the unit's rear wall as they approached, their body language tense with mutual distrust. "This better be important, Trevor," Victoria said, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. "I have a flight to catch in 6 hours." "Flight to where?" Trevor asked. "Montana, obviously. The advance team is already preparing the facility." Victoria unlocked the storage unit and gestured for Trevor to enter first. "After you." Trevor hesitated, clearly recognizing the tactical disadvantage of entering first, but Victoria's impatient expression left him no choice. As soon as they were both inside, Roland activated a jamming device that would block all cell phone signals within a 50-foot radius. The storage unit was exactly as the photographs had suggested: rows of filing cabinets, medical equipment, and boxes of documentation. But what the photographs hadn't shown was the sophisticated video recording setup positioned to capture everything happening inside the unit. "What new evidence?" Victoria demanded. Trevor fumbled with one of the filing cabinets, his hands shaking. "Hospital security footage from the pediatric ward. From the nights when those 3 children died." Victoria went completely still. "That footage was destroyed." "Officially, yes. But I made backup copies before the hospital's internal investigation concluded." Trevor's voice was gaining strength as he delivered the lie Roland had coached him to tell. "High-definition video of you entering their rooms, administering unauthorized medications, and documenting their reactions." "You're lying." "Am I?" Trevor pulled out a tablet and showed Victoria a video file icon. "Shall we watch it together?" Victoria lunged for the tablet, but Trevor yanked it away. In that moment of distraction, Roland emerged from his hiding place behind the medical equipment. "I think we should all watch it together," Roland said. Victoria spun toward him, her face cycling through surprise, rage, and calculation in rapid succession. "Roland, how domesticated of you to follow your wife. Actually, I'm here for something else entirely." Roland stepped closer, and both Victoria and Trevor instinctively backed toward the unit's entrance. "I'm here to collect evidence." "Evidence of what?" Roland smiled and gestured toward the hidden cameras that had been recording their conversation. "Evidence of conspiracy to commit child abuse, murder, and racketeering. Evidence of your confession to killing 3 children. Evidence of Dr. Holloway's willing participation in your experiments." Trevor looked confused. "But I'm cooperating with you." "You are now. But you were an enthusiastic participant for 2 years before you grew a conscience." Roland's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "Did you really think I was going to let you walk away from this?" The realization hit Trevor like a physical blow. You're recording everything. Comprehensive documentation. Video, audio, digital evidence, financial records. Everything needed to ensure that both of you spend the rest of your lives in maximum security prisons. Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. The woman who'd played devoted wife and mother for 7 years was replaced by something cold and reptilian. "You have no idea what you're doing," she hissed. "I have Robert Klein completely under my control. I have documentation of your own negligence as a father. I have connections within the foster care system who will ensure Danny disappears completely if anything happens to me." "You had those things," Roland corrected. Past tense. Victoria pulled out her phone to call Klein, but the jamming device rendered it useless. Her growing panic was visible as she tried different numbers with the same result. "Robert Klein is currently in federal custody," Roland continued conversationally. "It's amazing how quickly someone talks when they're shown evidence of accepting bribes to facilitate child abuse." He provided a complete list of all the children you've treated through his referrals. Trevor was backing toward the storage unit's entrance, but Roland's next words stopped him cold. "Don't bother running, Doctor. Federal agents are positioned throughout this facility. The moment you step outside this unit, you'll be arrested on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, child abuse, and racketeering." "But I'm cooperating." Trevor's voice was desperate. "You're confessing. There's a difference." Roland pulled out his phone, which was connected to an external antenna that bypassed the jamming. "Your cooperation will be noted during sentencing, but it won't change the fact that you helped kill 3 children. Victoria had been listening to this exchange with growing fury, but now she smiled with something approaching her old confidence. "Very clever, Roland, but you've made one crucial mistake." She reached in her purse and pulled out a small device that looked like a garage door opener. "This facility, all the evidence stored here, and everyone inside this unit will be completely destroyed in approximately 10 minutes. Roland looked at the device with professional interest. "Incendiary charges? Military grade. Thermite composition that will burn hot enough to destroy every piece of evidence and leave nothing but unidentifiable ash." Victoria's smile was triumphant. "I always plan for contingencies." "So do I," Roland said. He pressed a button on his own phone, and immediately the sound of sirens filled the air. Through the storage unit's entrance, red and blue lights became visible as multiple emergency vehicles converged on the facility. "Fire Department Hazardous Materials Team," Roland explained. "Amazing how quickly they respond when someone reports a terrorist threat involving incendiary devices." Victoria stared at him with dawning comprehension. "You knew about the charges. I knew you wouldn't come here without an exit strategy. The same way I knew you tried to take Danny to Montana, whether I cooperated or not." Roland stepped closer, and Victoria found herself pressed against the filing cabinets. "The difference between us, Victoria, is that I've been planning your destruction since the moment I realized what you were. You've been planning contingencies. I've been planning total war." The sound of heavy boots on pavement indicated that the facility was being surrounded. Roland continued as if they were having a casual conversation. "Federal agents are currently searching our house and seizing all your electronic devices. Your storage units in 3 other states are being simultaneously raided. Your contacts within the foster care system are being arrested on federal charges. Your Montana facility is being shut down by Child Protective Services from 4 different states." Victoria's face had gone completely white. "That's impossible. You couldn't have organized all of that in 2 days." "I didn't. I've been organizing it for 7 years." Roland's smile was genuinely pleased. "Did you really think I didn't investigate my wife's background when we got married? I knew who you really were before our second date." The revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow. "Then why? Why did I marry you?" "Because I needed evidence of your crimes that would stand up in federal court. Because I needed to document your methods and identify your network. Because the only way to ensure you never hurt another child was to let you think you were successful until I had everything I needed to destroy you completely." Trevor was staring at Roland with a mixture of horror and admiration. "You've been planning this for 7 years. Every conversation, every argument, every moment of apparent affection was part of building a case against her. Roland's voice carried no emotion. The recording equipment in our house, the financial surveillance, the background checks on everyone she met, all of it designed to document her crimes and identify her accomplices. Victoria's hands were shaking now, but with rage rather than fear. And Danny, you used your own son as bait. I protected my son while gathering evidence against his would-be killer. Roland's voice finally carried emotion, cold, implacable fury. Danny spent the last 3 years with trained security personnel disguised as nannies and babysitters. Every moment you thought you were alone with him, every time you drugged him or hurt him, was being documented and transmitted to federal investigators. The sound of tactical teams entering the facility was clearly audible now. Roland checked his watch. In approximately 30 seconds, this storage unit will be surrounded by federal agents. You have 2 choices: surrender peacefully and spend the rest of your life in prison, or resist arrest and be killed in the process. Victoria's eyes were wild now, darting between Roland and the approaching tactical teams. You don't understand. I have evidence that could destroy you too. The things you've done to build your business empire are completely legal, if ethically questionable. Roland's smile was sharp, unlike systematically torturing children to death for scientific research. The tactical team reached the storage unit's entrance, their weapons trained on the 3 occupants. The team leader's voice was amplified and authoritative. Victoria Holloway, Dr. Trevor Holloway, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, child abuse, and racketeering. Step away from each other and keep your hands visible. As federal agents swarmed the storage unit, Roland stepped back to let them work. Victoria's last words to him were barely audible over the sound of handcuffs clicking into place. This isn't over. Roland leaned close enough to whisper in her ear. Yes, it is. And Victoria, every child you ever hurt is going to know that you'll never hurt anyone again. As they led her away, Victoria finally understood the true scope of her defeat. Roland hadn't just caught her. He'd systematically destroyed every aspect of her operation while she thought she was manipulating him. The game had never been chess. It had been demolition, and Roland was a master builder who knew exactly how to bring down structures that others thought were indestructible. Chapter 9. Foundation Reset. 6 months later, Roland sat in his office overlooking downtown Los Angeles, reading the final sentencing report. Victoria had received life without parole on 3 counts of first-degree murder, plus additional sentences for child abuse, racketeering, and conspiracy that would have kept her in prison for several lifetimes, even if the murder charges had been dismissed. Trevor Holloway had received 25 years as part of his cooperation agreement. His medical license had been permanently revoked, and he would spend the rest of his life in protective custody, as child abusers were notoriously short-lived in general population. Robert Klein and 7 other Child Protective Services employees had received sentences ranging from 10 to 15 years for their roles in Victoria's network. The federal investigation had expanded to include CPS offices in 12 states, resulting in the largest child welfare corruption scandal in American history. A soft knock on his office door interrupted Roland's reading. "Come in." Danny entered, followed by Marcus Chun. The boy had grown noticeably taller in the 6 months since Victoria's arrest, and the perpetual anxiety that had shadowed his eyes was finally beginning to fade. "Daddy, Uncle Marcus taught me how to tie knots today," Danny announced, proudly displaying a piece of rope with several complex knots. "He says every man should know how to tie things properly." Roland smiled, genuinely pleased. "That's very important knowledge. Show me what you learned." As Danny demonstrated his newfound skills, Roland reflected on the changes in his son's behavior since Victoria's removal from their lives. The boy slept through the night now, no longer waking up in terror from nightmares he couldn't explain. He played with uninhibited joy, no longer flinching when adults moved too quickly near him. Most importantly, he was beginning to trust that the adults in his life would protect him rather than hurt him. "Danny," Roland said, "why don't you show Uncle Marcus the new construction site models in the conference room? I'll be there in a few minutes." After they left, Roland returned to the sentencing report. The federal investigation had uncovered evidence of Victoria's involvement in the deaths or disappearances of 11 children across multiple states. Her meticulously documented research files had provided law enforcement with evidence linking her to cases that had been cold for years. The Montana facility had been converted into a legitimate treatment center for children recovering from trauma, a final irony that Roland found satisfying. The building that Victoria had intended as a torture chamber was now helping children heal from experiences similar to what she had inflicted. Roland's private phone rang, displaying an unknown number from a federal area code. Mr. Winters? This is Agent Sarah Walsh, FBI. I wanted to update you on a development in the Holloway case. What kind of development? Victoria Holloway was found dead in her cell this morning. Apparent suicide, though the investigation is ongoing. Roland absorbed this information without emotion. I see. Given your role in exposing her operation, I thought you should be informed directly. There's no evidence suggesting anything other than suicide, and her death doesn't affect the ongoing prosecutions of her network. Thank you for letting me know. After ending the call, Roland sat quietly for several minutes. Victoria's death meant that Danny would never have to testify about what she'd done to him, never have to face his mother in a courtroom and relive his trauma for the sake of justice. It also meant that Roland would never have the satisfaction of knowing she was suffering in prison for the rest of her life. But perhaps quick death was a fair trade for his son's continued innocence. Marcus returned to the office alone. Danny is completely absorbed in the construction models. He wants to know if he can design his own building. Tell him he can design whatever he wants. We'll figure out how to build it. Roland stood and walked to the window. Agent Walsh called. Victoria is dead. Marcus nodded, unsurprised. Prison justice or genuine suicide? Unknown, and I don't particularly care. Roland turned back to his security chief. What's the status on the other loose ends? All handled. The 3 men who were planning to testify in exchange for reduced sentences have been discouraged from doing so. Trevor Holloway's protective custody placement has been upgraded to ensure his long-term safety. Roland nodded. Despite Trevor's cooperation, the man had still participated in killing 3 children. But his testimony had been crucial to exposing Victoria's network, and Roland honored his agreements. And the families of Victoria's victims? Anonymous payments have been made to cover therapy, medical expenses, and education costs for all surviving victims. The families of the children who died have received substantial settlements from a foundation established for that purpose. Roland had used his wealth systematically to address the damage Victoria had caused, though he knew that money could never truly heal the wounds she'd inflicted. But it could provide resources for recovery and ensure that her victims had every possible advantage in rebuilding their lives. Sir, Marcus hesitated, which was unusual for him. There's something else you should know. What? The federal investigation expanded beyond what we expected. They've identified similar operations in other countries, a network of facilities using Victoria's methods and documentation. International law enforcement is now involved. Roland felt a familiar coldness settle in his chest. Victoria's death might have ended her personal operation, but her methodology was apparently spreading like a cancer through an international network. How extensive? Preliminary reports suggest facilities in at least 6 countries. The documentation Victoria kept was apparently shared with other researchers. Roland walked back to his desk and opened a locked drawer that contained files he'd hoped never to use again. Inside were contact information for people who specialized in problems that required solutions outside the legal system. Marcus, I want complete intelligence on every facility, every operator, every financier involved in this network. Sir, the federal government is all ready. The federal government is bound by laws, treaties, and jurisdictions. Roland's voice carried the finality of an avalanche.